We were supposed to die here. A dead rock. No atmosphere worth breathing, no water worth sipping, and no neighbors worth talking to. The aliens called it a mercy exile. We called it Tuesday. By the end of the year, it'd be the most feared patch of dirt in the galaxy. That's how long it took for the shuttle's hatch to slam shut, the engines to scream, and the alien guards to vanish into the upper atmosphere, leaving us choking on dust. "Welcome to our new home," I said, brushing grit from my teeth. The horizon was a scorched line of jagged stone. No vegetation. No water. The wind carried the scent of rust and ozone, like the planet itself was bleeding. Corvin, our resident optimist, muttered, "Looks like Mars had a baby with a scrapyard." We were 43 humans, stripped of weapons, supplies, and anything remotely useful. The Ketheri Empire had been painfully polite about it. Polite in the way someone is when they're shoving you into a lifeboat and cutting the rope. Exiles, they called us. Security risk, their council had ruled. Translation: they were terrified. The rock, officially designated Coneth 12, was a failed mining colony. Centuries ago, the Ketheri had tried to strip it for minerals, only to abandon it when the ore ran out. Now, they'd found a new use for it, dumping inconvenient humans far enough away that no rescue would bother. I scanned the horizon with my visor. No structures, no signal beacons, no signs of life except our own footprints. Just the skeletal frames of abandoned rigs, half buried in sand. Behind me, Sergeant Vale spoke in a low voice. "They're watching us." I didn't need to ask how he knew. Vale had that marine sixth sense, the one that picked out sniper scopes at 1,000 yards. I tilted my head toward the nearest ridge. Sure enough, glints caught the light, recon drones, small enough to be mistaken for insects. "They expect us to die," I said. "Quietly, preferably." Corvin spat into the dust. "Then we should be noisy." By nightfall, we'd set up camp inside the rusted husk of a decommissioned drill rig. The place reeked of oil and time. The walls groaned in the wind, but at least they kept the cold out. Vale laid out our inventory. 14 emergency rations. 3 canteens of water. A coil of high-tensile cable. 1 functioning multi-tool. "That's it?" someone asked. "That's it," Vale confirmed. The silence was heavy. No one wanted to say it, but we all knew, on this world, that meant 2 weeks, tops. I broke the tension. "Good news is, the Ketheri are bad at math." Corvin raised an eyebrow. "Care to elaborate, Captain?" "They think survival is a matter of supplies. But we're human. We're stubborn. We turn rocks into fortresses and scraps into weapons." Vale gave a thin smile. "And we've got 43 engineers, soldiers, and problem solvers with nothing to lose." 3 days in, we found the first treasure. It was buried under a dune, the twisted remains of a Ketheri or hauler. The engines were fried, but the hull plating was intact. More importantly, the cargo bay still held a stack of industrial capacitors the size of coffins. To the Ketheri, they were worthless without a power grid. To us, they were the bones of something dangerous. Corvin stood with his hands on his hips, grinning at the pile. "Remind me, Captain, is this the part where we start building?" "Not yet," I said. "First, we make sure the drones think we're starving." The plan was simple. Keep the Ketheri confident in our inevitable demise. They'd leave the surveillance light, maybe even get sloppy. That meant staging arguments, ration fights, and fake sicknesses when the drones were in range. Vale orchestrated it like a theater director. Meanwhile, under cover of night, we scavenged. Every piece of abandoned machinery became a donor. Gears, wiring, reinforced struts. We kept our work hidden in the drill rig's deepest maintenance bay, far from prying lenses. 1 week in, we caught our first break, a storm. The winds here were brutal, but this was different, a wall of grit so thick you couldn't see your own hands. Perfect cover. Vale, Corvin, and I moved the capacitors into position while the others dismantled 2 derelict diggers. The treads, reinforced and motorized, would become the base. The capacitors, once aligned, could output enough charge to fry anything dumb enough to get close. "We don't even know what we're building yet," Corvin admitted, tightening a bolt. "Oh, I know exactly what we're building," I said. "We're building doubt. Doubt. When the Ketheri start asking, what if they survive? That's the first crack. And once there's a crack, the whole empire starts to shake." On the 10th day, I confronted one of the recon drones. It hovered a few meters away, lens swiveling, recording. I stepped into the open, hands raised in mock surrender. "You enjoying the show?" I asked it, because Act 2's going to be unforgettable. It made a soft chirp, banking away. I could almost imagine the operator on the other end frowning at the tone. Humans had a way of smiling while promising trouble. That night, Vale reported something unsettling. They've increased the drone coverage. 2 new models. Heavier optics. Someone's getting nervous. "Good," I said. "Let's make them more nervous." We worked in shifts, tearing into the salvaged hauler's reactor components. By human standards, the design was clumsy. The Ketheri didn't believe in redundancy. That made it easier to strip, modify, and repurpose. Our end goal wasn't just survival anymore. The idea had crept in quietly, like a whisper in the dark. If they were afraid enough to dump us here, what happens when we give them a real reason to be afraid? On the 12th day, Corvin brought me a small object, a dull, palm-sized metal sphere, half-cracked. "Found it in the mining yard," he said. "Looks like a sensor core. If we can get it working." I turned it over in my hand. Even broken, it was elegant, far more advanced than the rest of the junk here. "Corvin," I said, "you just gave us eyes." By the end of the 2nd week, we had the beginnings of a machine. Not a ship, not yet, but a platform. Something that could move, defend, and hit back. Every night, in the glow of scavenged lights, the framework grew. The others had started whispering a name for it, the answer. I didn't correct them, because they were right. Wind screamed across the barren plateau, carrying dust so fine it felt like powdered glass on the skin. The sun here didn't shine, it stabbed. The light was too bright, too white, and the sky an unforgiving metallic blue. Captain Rourke surveyed the horizon with the same detached curiosity he might give a half-burnt steak. "Picturesque," he muttered. "If you enjoy heatstroke and tetanus." Beside him, Sergeant Cole kicked at the reddish dirt. "Not even a weed. We've officially been dumped in the galaxy's largest litter box." The dead rock wasn't just an insult, it was literal. No surface water. No breathable atmosphere. The air outside the settlement domes could cook lungs in under 2 minutes. The ground was a chemical cocktail of corrosive salts and heavy metals. Any sane person would have written the place off as a mining colony graveyard. But humans, well, humans weren't known for quitting. Their alien hosts, the Virilians, had left them here under the guise of reassignment. In truth, it was a polite execution. Stranded without proper supplies, the human outpost should have folded within weeks. Instead, 3 months later, the place looked busy. Inside the largest dome, improvised machinery clanged and hissed. Rows of scavenged alien panels lined the walls, jury-rigged into something that hummed like an engine. The place smelled faintly of ozone, hot metal, and someone's burnt coffee. "You know," said Lieutenant Ramirez, leaning over a console, "this would go faster if half our parts weren't rusting hunks of—" "They're not junk," Rourke interrupted without looking up from his datapad. "They're opportunities." Ramirez raised a brow. "Opportunities?" This opportunity was part of a crashed food processor. "Exactly," Rourke said. We'll process something else with it. That was the pattern. Every day, the crew scavenged. Alien drop crates from older expeditions, wrecked transports, forgotten mining drones. Nothing escaped their notice. They didn't just salvage, they repurposed. From the outside, it looked like desperate survival. Inside, it was calculated preparation. On the other side of the dome, Private Juno knelt by a gutted mining crawler, hands buried in its greasy innards. Cap, you'll want to see this. The Virelians didn't bother removing the deep core resonance coils from the wrecks. Rourke looked over. Those are high-frequency oscillators. You're telling me they left them intact? Juno smirked. Guess they didn't think we'd know what they were for. Oh, we know, Rourke said, his voice soft, deliberate. And we're going to use them. Cole leaned in. For what? Digging tunnels. Rourke's lips curved into the kind of smile that usually preceded a disaster for someone else. Something louder. That night, under the pale glow of the settlement's shield lights, the crew gathered around the long workbench. Rourke unrolled a schematic stitched together from alien data scraps and human guesswork. It was rough, but everyone leaned in as if it were the blueprint for salvation itself. Here's the game, Rourke began. The Virelians think this is a holding pen. They're wrong. This is a construction yard. Ramirez studied the lines. That's a ship. Or part of one. Not just a ship, Rourke corrected. A ship they'll regret underestimating us for. A beat of silence passed before Cole chuckled. We're building a warship out of scrap metal and bad intentions. Exactly, Rourke said. The crew didn't cheer. There wasn't time for dramatics. Instead, they exchanged nods. The decision was already made. 2 weeks into the project, the alien patrol ship Viral's Grace landed nearby. Its captain, a tall, crystalline figure named Zelvar, stepped into the dome with an expression like polished contempt. I am here, Zelvar said, voice like chimes in a storm, to confirm that your settlement remains compliant. Of course, Rourke said smoothly. We're keeping busy. Zelvar's gaze slid over the piles of components and half-assembled modules. Your activities appear industrious. Yet your survival period has exceeded projections. Curious. Rourke smiled with practiced warmth. Humans adapt. We turn even the worst conditions into opportunities. You'd be surprised what we can make out of nothing. Nothing, Zelvar repeated, eyeing the improvised reactors. We will continue observing. As the alien left, Ramirez muttered under her breath, He suspects. Rourke shook his head. No. He's worried, and he doesn't know why yet. Let's keep it that way. Nights were the most dangerous time. The planet's surface temperature plummeted, making unshielded work deadly. Yet under the protection of the dome, welding arcs lit the darkness like tiny suns. They had no factory, no automated systems. Only hands, tools, and stubborn determination. Juno jury-rigged the oscillators into pulse emitters. Cole reconfigured drone servos into makeshift turret mounts. Ramirez scavenged control cores from a derelict atmospheric processor to serve as a ship AI, though AI was generous. It was more like a stubborn old computer with a sarcastic streak. And all the while, Rourke planned. One evening, while reviewing power grid allocations, Ramirez asked quietly, You've already got an endgame, don't you? Rourke didn't look up. The Virelians think dumping us here was the end of the story. They don't understand it's just Chapter 1. And Chapter 2? He finally met her gaze, and for a heartbeat the humor faded from his eyes. Chapter 2 is the part where we stop being polite. By the 3rd month, the skeleton of their creation took shape in the cavern beneath the main dome, an excavation hidden from alien eyes. Its frame was ugly by any shipyard standard, all mismatched plating and welded seams, but every bolt had a purpose. Cole ran a hand along the hull. She's going to fly? She's going to hunt, Rourke corrected. Above them, dust storms raged, carrying particles sharp enough to sandblast steel. But inside, humans worked with a kind of patience predators reserve for the perfect strike. Because here's the thing about dumping humanity on a dead rock. You weren't killing them. You were giving them a forge. The morning after the storm, the air over Blackrock Flats shimmered, not from heat, but from activity. Antennae arrays twitched toward the horizon, drones zipped back and forth, and humans crawled over the alien wreckage like ants dissecting a rival colony's leftovers. Lieutenant Mock Vance stood in the middle of it all, coffee in one hand, datapad in the other. "All right, people," he called, voice carrying through the thin air. "Today, we turn garbage into the galaxy's worst nightmare. Smile while you work. Makes the enemy nervous." The garbage in question was a half-buried battlecruiser hull, left behind when the Varelian Collective decided this planet wasn't worth salvaging. Its weapons were stripped, engines fried, and systems gutted, but to human eyes, it was just potential. "Structural scans show the frames intact," said Corporal Hale, emerging from the wreck's gaping wound. "We patched this thing with scavenged alloys and, a little imagination, and she'll hold." "A little imagination," Vance repeated with a smirk. "That's what scared the dinosaurs out of business." Hale blinked. "Sir, I don't think. It's a metaphor, Hale. Work with me." By midday, the shipyard, a generous term for a dusty plateau littered with cranes and fuel barrels, roared with the noise of cutting torches, welding sparks, and the rhythmic thud of impact hammers. Every part had a story: plasma coils from a downed frigate, reactor shielding from an abandoned mining rig, guidance arrays scavenged from a civilian cargo hauler that definitely wasn't abandoned when they found it. The alien prisoners, corralled in a fenced section of the camp, watched in confusion. One, a tall insectoid with gold-flecked eyes, leaned toward another. "They cannot possibly think this vessel will fly again." The other, a crystalline being whose voice was like grinding ice, responded, "They do not think as we do. They improvise." "They guess," the insectoid corrected. Vance, overhearing, wandered over with the casual confidence of a man who already had the punchline. "Guessing's just knowing something so fast your brain hasn't caught up yet," he said cheerfully. "You'll see." The insectoid tilted his head. "You are building without proper schematics." "Oh, we've got schematics," Vance said, patting the datapad in his hand. "They're just in my head. Alongside the recipe for perfect barbecue ribs. Both equally dangerous." That night, the core team gathered in the mess tent, lit by the warm glow of jury-rigged lanterns. The air smelled faintly of metal dust and engine grease. On the table lay a rough blueprint, a mess of lines, arrows, and coffee stains. "We call it the Black Phoenix," Vance announced. "Because like any good myth, it starts dead and ends terrifying." Hale pointed to a jagged cluster of notations. These are weapons placements?" "Yup. Mix of alien energy cannons and good old-fashioned human railguns." "We don't have railguns," Hale said cautiously. Vance grinned. "Yet." Day 12. Progress accelerated. The frame was reinforced with composite plating hammered into shape with sledgehammers and stubbornness. Improvised fusion vents jutted from the rear, each one cobbled from mismatched engine parts that by rights should have exploded the moment they were bolted together. In the corner of the yard, a group of engineers debated over the targeting systems. "We can't get the alien guidance matrix to talk to our fire control software," one said. "Then don't make it talk," Vance cut in. "Teach it to listen. Worst case, we duct tape a human gunner to the console and let instinct do the work." "That's insane." "It's combat." "Same thing." The alien prisoners began to whisper. Some claimed the humans were desperate. Others said they were reckless. But a few, those who'd fought humans before, fell silent, their eyes narrowing. One evening, the crystalline prisoner approached the fence. "What is your plan, human?" Vance didn't look up from the crate he was inventorying. Plan. You are not merely repairing a ship. You are preparing something. For someone. Vance finally met the alien's gaze, his smile polite and faintly predatory. You'll find out when they do. Day 21. The ship was beginning to look alive. The exterior was patched, hull plating smoothed, and the forward cannons, still missing their power feeds, were mounted like the teeth of some waking beast. Inside, the crew ran drills, memorizing the ship's improvised layout. Every bulkhead, every hatch had its own quirks. Doors that needed a kick to seal, panels that hummed just a bit too loud, corridors that doubled as coolant conduits. In the mess hall, Hale slumped into a chair. We're almost there, sir. But why rush it? The ship'll fly whenever it's ready. Vance's expression sharpened just a hair. Because the Varelians will be here in less than a week. And I'd rather greet them in orbit than in our backyard. You knew they were coming back? Hale asked. Vance sipped his coffee. Of course. You don't leave valuable tech lying around unless you're planning to pick it up later. We're just setting a trap around it. Day 28. The Black Phoenix stood ready. Her mismatched panels gleamed in the starlight, her engines purred with an uneven but determined rhythm, and her weapons hummed with barely restrained power. The crew stood at attention as Vance addressed them from the gangway. They dumped us on a rock they thought was dead. They gave us scraps, assuming we'd wither. Instead, he gestured toward the ship. We built something that'll make them wish they'd sent an army instead of a garbage scow. The crowd laughed, but there was an edge to it, something fierce and eager. Vance's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. When they arrive, we're not just going to survive. We're going to introduce ourselves properly. By midnight, the Black Phoenix lifted off for her first test flight, her shadow stretching across the desert like the wings of a predator. From the prisoner pens, the crystalline alien whispered, "They are not improvising anymore. They are baiting." The insectoid swallowed hard. And we are in the trap with them. The launch bay's blast doors sealed behind the last cargo hauler. The thud echoed through the command deck like a gunshot in a cathedral. Every screen now displayed the same image, an impossible silhouette suspended in the thin, toxic atmosphere of this dead rock the galaxy had abandoned us on. The arc light. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't sleek. It was jagged, asymmetrical, and bristling with weapon mounts that no alien engineer would approve of. It looked like something welded together in the back of a scrapyard by people who'd been dared to make it fly. That wasn't far from the truth. But it wasn't the shape that scared me, it was the numbers. The yield estimates, the acceleration curves, the thermal output. The simulations said it could tear through a fleet without slowing down. The simulations also said, in polite, understated font, that its reactor exceeded all safe operational parameters by 940%. The aliens who dumped us here thought they'd left us to rot. Instead, we'd built a nightmare. Report. My voice carried across the command deck. Hale, our chief engineer, didn't look up from his console. His hands moved like a pianist hammering out a final, impossible chord. Reactors stable. Or at least our definition of stable. Shields at 98%. Guns, well, they'll work. If they don't, we've still got Plan B. I raised an eyebrow. Plan B. He grinned. Hit them with the ship. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. The comm officer, Rilla, glanced over her shoulder. Incoming transmission. Multiple sources. Looks like every fleet in orbit just woke up. Put them on. The holographic array bloomed to life, and suddenly the deck was filled with alien faces. Shimmering scales, insectal mandibles, chitinous armor, eyes that didn't blink. All of them talking at once, their voices overlapping into a wall of panic and accusation. Detected forbidden reactor signatures. How did humans acquire dreadnought-class power systems? Your settlement was under demilitarization orders. I smiled, polite as you please. Good morning, esteemed delegates. They quieted. Slowly. The way you might quiet a room after a predator walks in and closes the door. One of them, a hulking Morvith with bone spines along his jaw, leaned forward. You were sent here as exiles. This is a violation of the Concordance Charter. I folded my hands behind my back. You dumped us here with mining tools and scrap metal. We used them. That thing is not a mining tool. I tilted my head. Neither is a warship blockade, but you've had one around our planet for the last 6 months. Forgive me if we got creative. Hale coughed into his fist, just loud enough for me to hear. They're stalling. Their fleet's moving into strike formation. I kept my tone light. Delegates, perhaps we could resolve this without unpleasantness? The insectoid representative's mandibles clicked. Deactivate the vessel and submit to inspection. Immediately. I let the silence stretch until it was almost uncomfortable. Then I stepped forward. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, the Arclight is temperamental. Once she's awake, she doesn't like to go back to sleep. The Morvith bared his teeth. You threaten us? Oh no, I said pleasantly. I'm giving you a courtesy warning. Because humans are famously bad at remembering the fine details of alien treaties. We tend to improvise. The transmission cut. Not disconnected. Cut. That was fine. They'd be back. Hale swiveled his chair toward me. They'll hit us within the hour. Rilla tapped her display. 37 minutes, if they push those dreadnoughts to max burn. I nodded. Plenty of time. Plenty of time for what? To make sure they see everything. We broadcast the launch sequence across every comm channel in the sector. No encryption. No scrambling. Just raw, unfiltered feeds of the Arclight systems spinning up. Reactor cores blooming with plasma light. Magnetic rails charging. Hull plates shifting into combat configuration. Aliens love their secrecy. Humans love their spectacle. If they were going to kill us, we were going to make sure the whole galaxy watched. The launch ramp trembled as the clamps disengaged. I felt the vibration through my boots. A deep, thrumming heartbeat. Engage. The Arclight lifted, slowly at first, then with a sudden violent surge that pressed everyone back in their seats. She tore free from the dust clouds, sunlight glinting off her jagged armor. Targets acquired, Rilla said. They're hailing again. Put them on screen. The Morvith's face reappeared, rage barely contained. If you fire that weapon... I cut him off. You'll what? Add another fleet to the blockade? Start a war you've been pretending doesn't already exist. You will be annihilated. I leaned forward, just enough for my shadow to fall across the console. Maybe. But we've got a gift for you. If anything happens to us, this ship's AI will transmit her entire design archive to every shipyard in known space. Every species, every faction, even the ones you're really scared of. You think we're dangerous? Imagine what they'll do with our blueprints. For a moment, there was no sound but the hum of the deck. The Morvith's jaw worked, but no words came out. Then the transmission cut again. Hale looked at me. Was that bluffing? I smiled faintly. Mostly. The enemy fleet kept closing. They weren't backing down. Shields up, I ordered. Weapons live. The Arclight's hull shuddered as the first salvo came in. Plasma bolts burning through the upper atmosphere, lighting the clouds like a second sunrise. Return fire, I said. And we did. The Arclight didn't roar. She howled. Railguns spat hypervelocity rounds that split dreadnought plating like paper. Energy lances carved molten scars across enemy hulls. Every shot was a statement. You thought we were broken. You thought wrong. They hit us hard. We hit harder. By the time the smoke cleared, half their fleet was gone. The rest was limping away, scattering like startled birds. On the quiet, shattered deck, Hale leaned back, eyes wide. We just made every power in the galaxy afraid of us. I exhaled slowly. Good. That was the point. Rilla turned from her console. So what now? I looked out at the stars, where the wreckage still burned. Now, we let them think about what happens if they try again. And while they're thinking, Hale grinned. We build something worse.